Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, I'd like to talk about what I've done in coding the actions of companions. So we have a combat setup here, as you can see. We have a single companion, and it's their action. They've chosen to shoot, and they have successfully hit an enemy, and then they choose to pistol whip. And because there's no enemy in range, which is correct from what we've got displayed here, they decide to move. And like the enemies, that's done by simulating the roll of two six-sided dice. And then if that number is lower than or equal to their current hit points, they will move towards a chosen enemy. And if it's higher than their hit points, they'll move away from. So once they get wounded, they'll sort of be a bit cautious and want to be out of the fight. And it's happened as it should. They roll an 8, and so they want to move towards, and that makes sense given their current hit points of 12. So if we click continue, when we next get a display, we should find that companion 1 is up here in distance 1. So let's have a look and see if it's worked. And indeed it has. So that's what it does. Let's have a look at the code. So all the code we're going to be looking at today is in a little bit of it's in companion. And then we've got these two new passages, Companion Moves and Companion Moves 2. And it works very similarly to how the enemies move. We have Enemy Moves and Enemy Moves 2. And in fact, they're so similar that when I was coding this, I copied and pasted the code from Enemy Moves to Companion Moves and the code from Enemy Moves 2 to Companion Moves 2 and changed the names of the variables. And there was a couple of other changes I had to make because in the case of the enemy, the player character is treated slightly differently. Their stuff is stored in slightly different places compared to the companions, which in hindsight is probably a design flaw. They probably all should be in the same array. It would probably make it a little bit easier, but at the moment it's probably easier to leave it as is. But anyway, let's look at companion. So let's zoom in. So as we've talked about before, first we see whether they need to stand up. Then we find the distance to the closest enemy. We choose an attack at random, and then we compare the range of that attack to the nearest enemy. Is there any range? Is there any enemy within range of the chosen attack? If so, and that's what that if is there. If so, we go to companion target, and that will go to PC side attacks. We've talked about that. But here's what we're talking about today. There's no enemy in range, and so the companion decides to move. We go to companion moves. First, we have to choose a target. As the note says, we choose a random number between 1 and enemy underscore max. If that enemy's hit points are less than 1, then we've chosen an enemy who is not present. There either wasn't an enemy in that slot at all, or there was, but they've been killed in the combat so far. And in either case, we go back to the top of the page. We include companion moves again. Otherwise, we've chosen a valid target, and therefore we go to companion moves 2. We have a little note saying it's all testing only, because this isn't how the display is meant to work. You should remember that we've been using this text display for ages, but actually the intended final look of the thing is a visual display, a sort of first-person visual display. But anyway, we roll 2 dice, or we simulate doing that. We give that message. We compare the roll to the hit points of the companion who's acting, and we set X equal to 1 for retreat, or -1 for advancing, moving towards the chosen enemy, and then we make that happen. So firstly we have the circumstance where the two of them are in the same slot, in which case If they want to retreat, they'll move randomly. They'll either move forward or back. They'll random 0, 1 times 2 minus 1 gives you a final result of either +1 or -1. Or if they're in the same slot but they want to advance, I don't know if mathematically that could ever happen, because that would mean that they've chosen an attack that has a range of... Oh, no, I suppose... No, I actually contradict myself, because remember some of the enemies are flying, so they could be... theoretically, they could be in the same slot. They could choose Pistol Whip. And they could... the enemy... There could be a single enemy who is hovering, and so they can't get them. So that could happen. It's pretty unlikely. But in that case, they will just stay still. Otherwise, except in that special circumstance where the chosen enemy is in the same slot, we add X if the companion's distance from the player character is greater than that of the chosen enemy, or we remove X if it's not, in which case, if we get here, it's only if it's less. So let's look at an example. Let's say the enemy wants to advance, so therefore X is -1. Let's say they are in slot 5 and the enemy's in slot 3. Well, this will be true. So we add X to their 5, and because X is -1, they'll go to 4, of course. 5 plus -1 is 4. So that makes sense. If you're in 5 and you move to 4, you are indeed moving closer to 3. And then that's how it works. And then, of course, at the end of all that, usually they'll move. There's a unlikely corner case where they can't. But either way, that'll be their action. So if they're in there and can't do anything, I guess that what's happening in the fiction of the game is they sort of look around and kind of waste their action, basically sort of deciding what to do, realising that there's nothing they can do to get closer to an enemy. And that is how it works. As I said, it's virtually the same as when the enemies move. Stuff about trust and the charisma of the player character and so on, they're going to start to come into play in the immediate future when we talk about the companions giving orders. So that's what we will be looking at in videos immediately to come. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.